The checkpoint stood on a dry plain of gray dust and broken stone. The sky above it was pale and thin, with no clouds and no color. Human ships rested on metal legs around the checkpoint, tall and heavy, like silent guards. Their engines were quiet, but their lights stayed on day and night. The place smelled of fuel, cold air, and old sand. Human soldiers moved in slow lines. They wore simple armor and carried rifles, but their faces showed more tiredness than anger. They had been here for months. Supplies came in, supplies went out, and orders stayed the same. No one crossed the line without permission. No aid without command approval. No contact unless needed. Most days, nothing happened. On this day, something did. Evan stood near the main gate holding a data pad. He was not the highest officer, and not the lowest. He was old enough to know how orders worked, and young enough to still feel wrong when they hurt people. His armor was scratched, his boots covered in dust. He watched the horizon while pretending to read reports he already knew. The alien settlements lay far away, beyond the checkpoint. Once, they had been bright with energy and light. Now, they were dark shapes on scanners. No ships launched from them. No signals came in. Just silence and weak heat readings. Command said the aliens were hiding something. Evan was not so sure. Movement caught his eye. At first he thought it was wind pushing dust. Then he saw a small shape moving closer. Too small to be a vehicle, too slow to be an animal. A child. She walked alone. The soldiers near the gate noticed her too. Hands moved closer to weapons, but no one raised them. The child stopped several steps from the line painted on the ground. It was a bright red line. On one side was human space. On the other side was not. She did not cross it. She was small, thinner than any human child Evan had seen. Her skin was pale blue, stretched tight over sharp bones. Her eyes were large and dark, and her clothes hung loose on her body. In her arms, she carried a bundle of objects. Metal pieces, small, glowing shapes, broken tools, toys. She stood there, breathing hard. The wind pushed dust around her feet. No one spoke. Protocol said to warn her away. Protocol also said not to accept items, not to trade, not to talk. Evan took a step forward before he fully knew why. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his voice calm and clear. The child looked up. Her hand shook as she lifted the bundle higher. She spoke slowly, in broken human trade language. "Take my toys," she said. "Please, just give us food." "My brother hasn't eaten in days." The words hit the checkpoint like a stone dropped into still water. Some soldiers looked away. Others stared at her bundle. Even broken, the items were valuable. Alien technology always was. Command would pay a lot for even one piece. Evan felt his throat tighten. "How old is your brother?" he asked. The girl swallowed. "Small," she said. "He cannot walk far." She took one step closer to the line, then stopped herself, fear flashing across her face. She had been warned. Cross the line, and humans would react fast. Behind Evan, another officer spoke quietly. "Sir, we need to send her back." Evan nodded, but did not move. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl lowered her eyes. "Gone," she said. She did not explain. She did not need to. The wind picked up. One of the glowing toys flickered, then went dark. A siren sounded far away, a short warning tone. Not an alarm, but close. Evan's datapad buzzed with a message. Supply levels normal. Orders unchanged. He looked at the girl again. She held out the bundle with both hands now. Her arms trembled from the weight.
"Please," she said again. Her voice was quiet, but it carried.
Evan knew the rules. He had memorized them. He also knew that a ration pack sat in the crate behind him. One pack would not change a war. One pack would not break a supply line. One pack could keep a child alive. He turned his body slightly, blocking the camera angle. He reached back and took a ration pack. His heart beat fast, not from fear of punishment, but from the speed of the choice. He stepped forward and placed the pack on the ground, just short of the red line. The girl's eyes widened. "For the food," Evan said. "You keep the toys." She shook her head hard. "No, you take." "I cannot," he said. "But you can eat." For a moment she did not move. Then she stepped forward, crossed the red line with one foot, grabbed the pack, and jumped back like the ground had burned her. She held the pack tight against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Before Evan could say anything else, she turned and ran. Her legs were thin, but she moved fast, disappearing into the dust. The checkpoint stayed silent. Then the siren sounded again. Louder this time, a voice came over the speakers. "All units, remain alert. Unknown movement detected near Sector 3. Evan looked toward the horizon. Dark shapes moved far away, too far to see clearly. The officer behind him spoke again. "Sir, command is watching." "I know," Evan said. Minutes passed. The girl did not return. Evan hoped she reached her brother in time. The alert ended, but tension stayed. Later, when the sun dipped low and the light turned red, Evan was called inside the command unit. A screen lit up with a distant face. "Explain the ration loss," the voice said. Evan spoke carefully. "A civilian contact. One pack." There was a pause. "This is not approved." "I know," Evan said. Another pause. "Do not repeat it." The screen went dark. That night, Evan could not sleep. He kept seeing the girl's eyes. Not fear, not anger. Hope mixed with hunger. Near dawn, sensors picked up movement again. This time, more than one shape approached. Evan stepped out as soldiers took positions. His hand rested near his weapon, but he did not raise it. 3 figures came into view. The girl was there, walking carefully. Beside her, 2 older aliens supported a smaller shape between them. Her brother. He was very small. His head lolled to one side. His skin was dull, his eyes half closed. The ration pack was empty in the girl's hands. She stopped at the red line again. "He ate," she said quickly, as if afraid they would be angry. "But he needs more." The older aliens bowed their heads. They carried nothing but thin cloth and empty hands. Evan felt something break inside his chest. Before he could speak, alarms screamed. This time, it was a full alert. Lights flashed. Weapons powered up. Ships hummed as engines warmed. A voice shouted over the noise. "Multiple contacts inbound. Unknown origin." The girl looked around, terrified. Evan stepped forward and stood between her and the guns. "Get back," someone yelled at him. He did not move. The sky darkened as ships moved overhead. Somewhere beyond the horizon, something had changed. Evan knew one thing for sure. This was no longer about one ration pack, and whatever came next, there would be no easy way back. The next day at the checkpoint, the dust was still settling from the alarms. The sun was higher now, pale and hot, casting long shadows across the cracked metal plates of the human outpost. Soldiers moved with sharper urgency, eyes scanning the horizon. Evan stood near the edge of the compound, watching the aliens from the previous day. The girl, Lyra, stayed close to her brother Cato. He was smaller than most children, his skin pale and stretched over his bones. He walked slowly, leaning on the support of two older aliens, one on each side. Their faces showed worry, hunger, and fatigue. The aliens did not speak much. Their language was broken, filled with clicks and low hums. Lyra tried her best to use the human trade language she had learned from passing ships. She held out empty hands, pleading without words. Evan could see it clearly in her eyes. Her brother was weak, and without food, he would not survive the day. Evan moved closer, ignoring the warning yells from other soldiers. "We have supplies," he said. "I can help." The older humans looked at him with suspicion. "Sir, you can't just give them anything," one said. "Orders are strict." "This is not allowed." Evan shook his head. "They are starving." "One pack will not break anything. Let me do it." He reached behind him and grabbed a small container of rations. He stepped forward and placed it on the ground, just a few feet from the red boundary line that marked the edge of human space. Lyra's eyes widened. She did not hesitate this time. She stepped across the line carefully, picked up the container, and handed it to her brother. Cato's small hands trembled as he held the pack. He looked at it for a long moment, unsure if it was real. Then he opened it slowly, and a small smile appeared on his face for the first time in days. The humans watched quietly. Some felt anger, some pity, but most were shocked. Command had said not to help. Yet here was a human bending the rules, helping those in need. As Cato ate, more aliens began to appear from behind the dunes. They were thin, some walking with difficulty, some crawling. They came carrying old, broken devices, metal scraps, and toys. They placed these on the ground as if to trade them for more food. Evan realized that their hunger had driven them to desperation. They had nothing left, not even hope. One of the older aliens spoke in a low hum, and Lyra translated, "We are many. We need much. Please do not turn us away." Evan knew he could not give all the rations. There was not enough for the entire group, but he also knew he could not refuse. The soldiers around him tensed. Weapons were raised, but no one fired. They watched as Evan made his decision. He motioned for the aliens to come closer. Slowly, carefully, they approached. Each received a small portion of food, just enough to keep them from collapsing. Cato finished his pack and looked around at the others. His eyes were bright now, more alive than the day before. He wanted to share, and Evan could see the determination in his small face. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the ground. The humans turned quickly, weapons raised. In the distance, a human cargo convoy was under attack. Smoke rose in thin plumes and small explosions dotted the horizon. Soldiers shouted orders, but no one was certain what to do. The aliens froze, looking from Evan to the horizon. Confused and afraid, Evan ran to the communication console. He tried to call command, but lines were jammed. The screen flickered and went black. Whatever was happening, it was not human-made. Yet the attack had been precise. The convoy had not been destroyed, but damaged enough to stop it in its tracks. "Sir," one officer said, "they're saying the aliens attacked the convoy. They must have done it to steal supplies." Evan's stomach turned. He knew it was not true. The aliens were weak, starving. They could not have launched an attack like this. He shook his head. "No, it is not them. Someone is using this to start a fight. The aliens looked at him, their wide eyes full of fear. Lyra clutched Cato, trying to shield him. The small boy could barely stand. Evan moved between the aliens and the soldiers, holding up his hands. "They are not your enemy," he said. "Do not fire." Another rumble shook the ground. This time it came closer. The dust rose higher, and shapes appeared in the distance, fast, precise, and armed. These were not starving aliens. These were attackers using human weapons. Someone wanted the humans to believe the aliens were dangerous. The soldiers hesitated, unsure. Some wanted to fire, but Evan stepped forward. "Look," he said. He pointed to the figures. "See how they move. Not like the aliens. Not like the weak." The attackers seemed to notice the humans noticing them. They vanished behind the dunes as quickly as they had appeared. Communication lines came back alive for a moment. Command called for a full strike. Missiles were armed and a squadron was on alert to eliminate the supposed threat. Evan looked at the aliens. Cato was pale and shaking, barely able to hold himself up. Lyra was scared, but she still tried to smile. The older aliens bowed their heads. They trusted Evan, even though they had never known humans before this moment. Evan knew what he had to do. He could not allow his own command to punish these people for crimes they did not commit. He needed to protect them but also prevent a war. He turned to the soldiers near him. "We need to hide them," he said. "Keep them safe and no one fires. Do you understand?" The soldiers looked at each other. Some hesitated, some nodded. They trusted him because they knew he had made the right choice. The day before, slowly, they lowered their weapons. Evan guided the aliens into the shelter of the compound. It was small, a storage area meant for equipment, not living beings. The aliens squeezed inside, making room for Cato to lie down. Lyra held his hand, whispering softly in her language. Evan did not understand, but the tone told him it was comforting. Hours passed. Outside, the human forces prepared for action. The strike fleet was still on alert. Missiles and laser arrays hummed quietly, waiting for a signal. Communication with command was limited. Evan knew that any wrong message could trigger an attack. He sat next to Cato and offered water. The boy drank slowly, then looked at him with wide eyes. Evan smiled softly. "You are safe," he said. "For now." The other aliens watched him carefully. They did not speak much, but their eyes followed every movement. Trust was fragile, built only in moments like these. Evan knew the risk. He had broken orders, given food to aliens against protocol, and now hidden them during a human alert. Yet he could not regret it. One life, one small boy, was more important than the rules that could kill him. Outside, the sun began to set. The shadows lengthened across the checkpoint. The wind carried dust and the faint smell of burning metal from the damaged convoy. Lyra sat beside Cato, stroking his head gently. The older aliens whispered in their language, and Evan could feel the tension in the room slowly release. But relief was short-lived. The alert system suddenly blared again. A new signal appeared on the scanners. More ships, moving fast and unknown. The human strike fleet reacted immediately, engines firing, weapons powering up. The aliens froze, unsure if the humans would fight or flee. Evan stood again. He had no orders, no support, and no certainty. Yet he knew one thing. The aliens under his care were helpless without him, and human ships were ready to destroy anything that moved. He took a deep breath. He would not let them die. The signal grew stronger. Shapes appeared on the scanners, too fast to be ordinary craft. Someone wanted the humans to strike first, and they had chosen this moment to do it. Evan turned to the aliens. "Stay close," he said. "Do not move. Trust me." Cato's eyes met his. He gave a faint nod, too weak to speak. Lyra squeezed his hand. The older aliens leaned against the walls, watching. Evan's mind raced. Every option seemed dangerous. Every choice carried risk. The wrong move could start a war, endanger everyone, and kill those he had promised to protect. He looked at the approaching ships on the scanners. They were armed, precise, and moving fast. Not like starving aliens. Not like refugees. Someone wanted chaos. Evan clenched his fists. He would find the truth. He would stop the attack. And he would protect the aliens, no matter what command said. The sun disappeared behind the horizon. Darkness spread across the checkpoint. The wind carried the sound of engines and distant explosions. Inside the shelter, Cato slept fitfully, exhausted from hunger. Lyra whispered to him, hoping he would recover. The older aliens kept watch, tense but trusting Evan's judgment. Outside, the unknown ships drew closer. Their presence was a threat, and their intentions were unclear. Evan knew the moment of choice had arrived. He could not wait for command. He had to act, and quickly. The night stretched on, heavy with tension. Every second counted. The fate of the aliens, the humans at the checkpoint, and the approaching ships rested on decisions made in the dark. And Evan knew the first move would determine everything. The checkpoint was quiet after the long night, but the silence was fragile, like thin ice over deep water. Evan walked among the soldiers, checking scanners and listening to the hum of the engines. Outside, dust clouds rose from the distant dunes, moving as if something unseen passed through them. The aliens huddled inside the storage shelter, still wary but calmer than before. Cato slept, exhausted from food and fear, while Lyra sat beside him, her small hands resting on his thin arm. Evan's mind raced. Last night had proven something he already feared. The aliens were not responsible for the convoy attack. Someone else had used human weapons to make it look like the aliens were dangerous.
But who and why?
He returned to the communication console and started going through logs. Every message, every transmission from the previous hours was available. He scanned them quickly, reading sequences of coordinates, ship IDs, and timing signals. Something stood out. A series of ships that had not been on any official manifest. They were human-made, armed, and moving at impossible speeds. Smugglers. That had to be it. Someone wanted the checkpoint to blame the aliens and force a human strike. It was clever, dangerous, and deadly. He realized the attackers had also disabled some sensors, making it harder to identify them.
A voice called from the shelter.
"Sir, are you sure they did not do it?" One of the soldiers, young and nervous, watched the aliens carefully. "They seem weak. But, maybe." Evan shook his head.
No, look at them.
Starving, sick, scared. They cannot attack a convoy like that. Someone else used this to make humans attack first. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. Trust was hard after months of strict orders. But Evan had proven yesterday that he could judge situations differently. Some began to nod, understanding slowly. He turned his attention to the aliens. Lyra was watching him closely, sensing both fear and hope in his expression. She stepped forward, careful not to cross the red line which had been set long ago to separate human and alien territory.
We are safe?
She asked. Her trade language was broken but clear enough. "For now," Evan said. but you must stay inside. You cannot move until we know what is happening." The older aliens hummed quietly among themselves. They did not speak human language, but they seemed to understand the tone. Cato stirred, opening one eye, then closing it again. Evan gave him a small smile. The boy was alive, and that was enough for now. Evan returned to the console and tried to trace the strange ships. The logs were incomplete, but patterns emerged. Coordinates showed the ships moving in odd ways, avoiding normal trade routes. They did not visit other checkpoints or colonies. They went straight for the human convoy. Timing was perfect. Whoever had planned this knew exactly how to make it look like the aliens had attacked. He tapped the console, pulling up more detailed images. Ship profiles, small and agile, armed with human weapon systems. Not large warships, small, fast craft. Smugglers. Pirates. Murderers hiding behind the innocence of starving people. Evan took a deep breath. "This is bigger than I thought," he said to himself. He had to prove it to command. If he did not, more humans might attack the aliens. More lives would be lost. He began recording the evidence. Every scan, every trajectory, every unusual ship signature. He compiled it into a message he could send, a proof that the aliens were not the enemy. But as he prepared it, another problem appeared. Communication channels were being monitored. Someone might intercept his message. Evan had to be careful. If the wrong person saw this, the smugglers would strike again. Worse, Command might still believe the aliens were responsible and fire missiles before the truth reached them. He glanced toward the shelter. The aliens were restless. Hunger was fading, but fear was still present. Lyra's eyes followed him. She was small but determined. "We must survive," Evan said quietly. "I will protect you, but you must trust me." Outside, the engines of human ships hummed, louder. Command was ready to act. Missiles were armed. Soldiers were on alert. Even one small misstep could trigger destruction. Evan moved carefully among the humans, explaining the situation in low voices, showing logs and data, pointing out patterns. Some listened, some shook their heads, unable to believe that human smugglers could have used the aliens as bait. Then the first sign of danger arrived. Small, fast ships appeared again on the scanners. Unlike the convoy attack, these ships were moving directly toward the checkpoint. Evan realized immediately that the smugglers had returned. They were not attacking the aliens. They were trying to destroy evidence or provoke a human strike. He called for soldiers who trusted him to arm themselves, but he gave strict orders: no firing unless he said so. "Do not make mistakes," he said. "They want chaos. We will not give it to them." The smugglers' ships moved closer. Sensors picked up human-made weapons. Evan studied the patterns and realized they were trying to look like aliens again, using small cloaks and modified engines to imitate alien movement. Their plan was precise, but it had a flaw. They were too fast, too smooth. Any human who watched closely could see the difference. Evan knew he had only minutes. He activated the broadcast system. A live feed from the checkpoint cameras, including the aliens in the shelter, showed the starving children and adults. Then he overlaid the tracking data, highlighting the strange ships approaching. The path and speed of these ships did not match the aliens' weak abilities. He hesitated before sending it. One wrong move could trigger the missiles already armed. But he could not wait. He hit transmit. The feed went out to the fleet. Command screens lit up with the live video showing clear evidence. Aliens starving. humans feeding them. Strange ships moving in patterns impossible for the aliens. The smuggler's deception was clear. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. Then the first reactions arrived. Orders to halt the strike fleet came through, slowly at first, then more urgently. Some commanders questioned the legitimacy of Evan's report, but the evidence was undeniable. Meanwhile, the aliens in the shelter watched in silence. Kato looked up at Evan. Lyra held his hand tightly. Evan gave them small smiles, but he did not relax. The threat was not gone. The smugglers would still strike. Command was still uncertain, and more human ships were approaching from other sectors, curious about the unusual activity. Evan's mind worked faster than he could speak. He needed to secure the aliens, keep them hidden, and prepare for the next wave. He checked rations. Food was limited. Water, too. The aliens had eaten yesterday, but the hunger was not gone. Kato was better, but still weak. Lyra was alert, protective, and ready. He made a decision. They could not remain in the checkpoint indefinitely. Too many sensors, too many eyes. He needed a safe location nearby, one that humans could not easily find and smugglers would not suspect. He called a small team of trusted soldiers. "We move them tonight," he said, quietly. "No alarms, no attention." The soldiers nodded. Some were nervous. Some were excited, but they trusted him. They had to. Lives depended on it. The aliens were briefed as best as Evan could. Lyra did not understand all the details, but she understood the urgency. She helped Kato prepare for travel, adjusting his thin blankets and carrying small supplies. The older aliens gathered what they could, taking the smallest, lightest things with them. As night fell, Evan led the group out of the shelter. The dunes were dark, the wind cold. Sensors on the checkpoint scanned the horizon, but Evan had plotted a path that avoided the main surveillance areas. The aliens followed closely, their small bodies moving carefully over rough terrain. Kato leaned on Lyra, walking slowly. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound, every shadow made Evan tense. Human patrols were still active. Any mistake could alert them. But he kept calm, guiding the group, whispering instructions. Halfway to the safe area, they heard engines approaching. Fast, small, maneuvering quickly. Evan froze. The smugglers had found them. They were not yet aware of the aliens' presence, but the attackers were moving in the general direction of the checkpoint and nearby dunes. Evan whispered to the soldiers, "Take positions. Use the terrain. We do not fight if we can avoid it, but we will defend if necessary." Lyra put her small hand over Kato's eyes, shielding him from the flashes of light that occasionally lit the dark dunes. The older aliens gripped small, makeshift tools. They had no weapons, only their presence. The first attack came as a small drone-like ship moved too close. It scanned the ground, searching for heat signatures. Evan guided the group into a narrow ravine. The drone's sensors passed overhead. For a moment, hearts stopped. Then it moved on. Evan breathed quietly. The path was still dangerous, but it was passable. They continued, careful, slow, methodical. Hours later, before dawn, they reached a hidden cave among the rocks. It was small, rough, and barely large enough for the group, but it was hidden from sensors. The aliens settled inside. Kato lay down, exhausted. Lyra stayed near him, whispering softly. Evan checked the perimeter. No signs of pursuit. For now, they were safe. Evan sat with the aliens, speaking quietly. "You are safe," he said. "For now. but we must prepare. The attackers will not give up. We have to survive, hide, and wait for the right moment. Outside, the first light of morning touched the dunes. The wind carried dust, and the faint sounds of distant engines reminded Evan that danger had not ended. The smugglers would return, human command would react, and more choices would have to be made. But inside the cave, for the first time since they arrived at the checkpoint, there was a moment of calm. Cato slept, Lyra watched over him, and the older aliens whispered quietly among themselves. Evan allowed himself a brief pause, knowing the storm was far from over, but taking strength in this fragile sanctuary. He did not know what the next day would bring. He only knew one thing clearly. He would protect these aliens, and he would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The cave was small, dark, and silent, but within it, hope had survived. The dawn broke over the dunes with a pale, weak light. The cave where Evan and the aliens hid was quiet, filled only with soft breathing and whispers. Cato slept in a small corner, his chest rising slowly, finally steady after days of hunger. Lyra stayed close, her hand resting on his small shoulder. The older alien sat near the entrance, watching the rising sun and listening for any sound of approaching ships. Outside, the desert was calm, but Evan knew it was only the calm before a storm. The smugglers were still out there. Human command might still order a strike, not knowing the truth. Every step he took from now on had to be careful. Every choice mattered. He studied the scanners again. The nearby checkpoint was active. Human soldiers moved as usual, but the alert from the previous attacks had not completely ended. Some ships were still in position, waiting for orders. Command could see the situation differently, depending on which officer reported first. Evan had to act before any misunderstanding could destroy the fragile safety of the aliens. "Sir," whispered one of the soldiers he trusted, a young woman named Mara. She had stayed with him through the last attack. "Command is sending orders again. They want to sweep the dunes for the aliens." Evan nodded. He had expected this.
"Then we move first," he said. "We cannot wait for them to decide our fate."
He turned to Lyra.
"You and your brother must stay close. Trust me."
She nodded, squeezing Kato's hand. The older aliens prepared their few supplies, wrapping blankets and small containers of food in a makeshift pack. Evan counted the ration packs, enough for a few days. Not much, but enough to move. They left the cave carefully. The dunes were soft under their feet, but the wind had begun to rise, blowing dust across the horizon. Evan led the group toward a rocky ridge he had scouted before. It was hidden from most sensors, and the terrain was difficult enough that any pursuit would slow down. As they moved, the first signs of human activity appeared. A patrol moved through the dunes, scanning for heat signatures. Evan signaled the group to flatten against the ground. They stayed silent, their breathing barely audible. The patrol passed by without noticing them. Evan allowed himself a small, quiet sigh. They were lucky. For now. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, turning the dunes white and harsh. Hunger was not gone. Kato's small stomach grumbled despite the rations he had eaten. Evan offered water and the smallest pieces of food he could spare. Lyra shared with him without hesitation. The older aliens ate sparingly, conserving energy. Finally, they reached the rocky ridge. The rocks were jagged and sharp, but they provided cover and a vantage point over the surrounding desert. From here, Evan could see several patrols moving farther away, and the dunes stretching toward the horizon. It was a dangerous place, but it was better than open sand. Evan set up a temporary perimeter. The aliens stayed inside the small, rocky area, hidden from view. He and Mara climbed a small rise to observe the movements of nearby ships. The scanners picked up multiple signals, some human, some unknown. The smugglers were still in the area, but not close enough yet. Evan could see the pattern. They were trying to herd the humans toward the aliens, hoping that fear and confusion would trigger a strike. He turned back to the aliens.
"You must stay quiet," he said. "Do not make noise."
"Do not move unless I tell you," Lyra nodded, holding Kato close. His eyes were tired, but he seemed calmer than before. Evan allowed himself a moment of relief. They were alive, and that mattered. Suddenly, the scanners picked up an incoming ship, moving fast. It was one of the smugglers' small craft. Evan signaled Mara. "Position yourself here," he said. "Do not fire unless necessary."
We are not attacking first. The ship appeared over the dunes, low and precise. Its sensors scanned the area, searching for heat signatures.
Evan held his breath. Kato stirred, and Lyra put her small hand over his eyes, shielding him. The ship moved slowly, almost as if it was sensing the terrain. It passed the ridge, missing them by mere meters. Evan exhaled slowly. The smugglers had come, but they had not seen the aliens. Their plan was to cause chaos, not to engage yet. He knew this would not be the last attempt. The smugglers were patient, dangerous, and clever. Hours passed. The aliens stayed hidden, conserving energy and rationing food. Evan moved between the rocks, scanning the desert and keeping the group quiet. He knew the next human patrol could arrive at any moment. If command acted on outdated information, a strike could occur, destroying everything. By evening, Evan decided to act. He could not simply hide. He had to prove to command that the aliens were innocent and that the smugglers were responsible. He found a safe location with a direct line to the communication relay. The signal was weak, but enough to transmit a short live feed. He called Mara to help him set up. "We will show them the truth," he said. "But it must be careful. No mistakes." The live feed began. The camera showed the aliens inside the rocky ridge. Kato sitting on a small blanket, Lyra holding his hand. The older aliens remained calm, but alert. Evan overlaid tracking data from the incoming ships. Arrows and paths highlighted the movement of the small craft, showing patterns impossible for the weak, starving aliens. He spoke quietly into the feed. "This is the truth. The aliens you believe attacked the convoy are starving refugees. They have no ability to strike or cause destruction. The attackers are human-made, small, fast, and outside control. They are smugglers, not the aliens you are told to fight." The feed reached command. Responses came slowly at first, then faster. Officers debated over the evidence. Some argued it was proof enough. Others hesitated, unwilling to believe human smugglers could be so clever. While command debated, Evan knew he had only a short window. The smugglers could return, and the human strike fleet was still in position, weapons armed and ready. He kept scanning the horizon, watching the shadows and movement of the dunes. Night fell. The desert became dark, with only the faint glow of distant engines visible. Evan checked the aliens. Kato slept, his small body finally resting. Lyra stayed awake, whispering to him, keeping watch. The older aliens remained calm but vigilant, listening to the wind and distant hum of machinery. Suddenly, a faint signal appeared on the scanners. Another craft. Moving quickly, but not like before. This one stayed high, scanning the area from above. Evan realized immediately. The smugglers were testing. They wanted to see if humans would strike, if the aliens would react. He whispered to Mara, "Get ready. Do not fire unless they attack." "We are defending," not provoking. The ship moved closer. Sensors highlighted its movements. It passed the ridge without seeing the aliens. Evan allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. They were still safe, but only for a short time. He returned to the shelter with the aliens. "You are safe tonight," he said softly. "We must rest. Tomorrow will be dangerous, but we will survive." The group settled for the night. Cato lay against Lyra, exhausted but more alive than the day before. The older aliens whispered quietly among themselves, trusting Evan's judgment, though their culture had never known humans before. Evan watched the desert from the ridge above, thinking Command would not fully trust him yet. The smugglers were still in the area. Hunger, fear, and misunderstanding could start a war at any moment, but for now, the group was alive. That was enough to plan the next move. He allowed himself a moment to breathe. The stars began to appear over the dunes. The night was quiet, almost peaceful, but danger lingered like a shadow. Evan knew the next day would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. He looked at the aliens sleeping beneath the rocks, Cato, Lyra, and the older ones. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility. Their lives depended on his choices. The desert outside could kill them in minutes if Command or the smugglers acted wrongly. Evan clenched his fists. He would not fail them. The night stretched on. Outside, the hum of distant engines reminded him that the world beyond the ridge was not safe. The smugglers were patient. Command was cautious but still dangerous. Inside the rocks, the aliens rested. Cato slept. Lyra watched over him, and Evan stayed awake, thinking, planning, protecting. The storm had not yet arrived, but it was coming, and when it did, Evan knew he would have to fight not with weapons alone, but with careful choices, courage, and trust. The night was long, but hope had survived. The aliens had food, they had safety, and they had Evan. That was enough to face the next day. The morning arrived cold and pale over the dunes. The cave where Evan and the aliens hid was quiet, but tension lingered in the air. Cato slept, finally rested, while Lyra stayed beside him, her small hands holding his arm gently. The older aliens watched the horizon, listening to the faint hum of engines and distant ship sensors. Every shadow and movement was a potential threat. Evan had spent the night planning. The smugglers were still out there. Human ships were still on alert, and Command had not fully understood the situation. He needed to act decisively before anyone made a mistake. A single false report could trigger a strike that would kill the aliens and potentially his own people. He went to the scanners and examined the approaching traffic. Several small craft moved rapidly, some human, some unknown. Evan identified the ones he suspected were smugglers. They were using human weapons and sensors to manipulate the situation, making it appear that the aliens were the aggressors. The pattern was clear. Their goal was chaos and profit. They wanted to force humans to attack innocent refugees. Evan turned to Mara, who was quietly watching the instruments. "We have to broadcast," he said. "We cannot wait for Command to make the wrong choice. If we do nothing, the aliens will die. The smugglers will win." Mara nodded. "The transmission will reach the fleet, but Command may still doubt it." "I know," Evan said, "but we have proof. The aliens are weak, starving. These attackers are human-made. The evidence is clear." He prepared the transmission. The feed included live images of the aliens, showing Cato eating small rations and Lyra standing protectively beside him. The older aliens were calm, their movements slow but purposeful. Evan overlaid tracking data showing the smugglers' ships moving in patterns impossible for the weak aliens. The arrows, paths, and timestamps clearly demonstrated the truth. He activated the feed. A live transmission began broadcasting to human command and the nearby fleet. Evan spoke clearly, calmly, without exaggeration. This is the truth. These aliens are not the attackers. They are starving, weak, and innocent. The recent convoy attack was carried out by human smugglers. Their ships were fast, armed, and outside command control. Any action against the aliens will result in unnecessary deaths and escalate a conflict based on lies. The response was slow. Command debated the evidence, some officers questioning the accuracy, some understanding immediately. Evan knew the smugglers were watching. Any hesitation could trigger another move. He monitored the horizon carefully. Suddenly, one of the small ships moved again, approaching the ridge where they were hidden. It scanned the area, but Evan's group remained still and out of the sensor's path. The ship's movements were deliberate, testing the perimeter. Evan whispered to Mara, "Keep the feed active. Show them the aliens. Keep tracking the ship. Do not react unless necessary." The smugglers did not detect the aliens. They moved past the ridge, scanning for heat signatures, then turned back toward the open dunes. Evan allowed himself a quiet sigh. They were safe for now, but only temporarily. As the transmission continued, more reactions came from the fleet. Orders were delayed. Commands were questioned. Officers debated whether to strike. Evan knew he had to maintain the feed until the evidence could be verified. Any interruption could undo hours of careful work. Hours passed. Cato began to stir, hungry again. Evan offered small pieces of food, conserving rations. Lyra shared her water and blankets with him. The older aliens accepted quietly, trusting Evan completely, though they had never known humans before. The small group stayed close, moving slowly as they prepared for the next stage of the plan. Finally, Command sent a response. The strike orders were halted. The fleet was instructed to stand down and verify the feed independently. Some officers were angry, some confused, but the truth had reached them. Evan allowed himself a small smile. The immediate danger was over, but the smugglers were not finished. Their ships remained in the area, watching, waiting. They knew humans had halted the attack, but they would try again. Evan prepared contingencies, planning escape routes and backup positions. He could not leave the aliens unprotected, not while the smugglers still lurked nearby. Evan turned to the aliens. "You are safe for now," he said softly. "But we cannot stay here. We must move to a safer location, further from the dunes and the patrols." Lyra nodded. Hato struggled to stand, but she supported him. The older aliens gathered what little supplies they had, wrapping food and blankets in small packs. Evan checked rations, water, and the perimeter once more. Every detail mattered. They moved carefully through the rocky ridge, using shadows and uneven terrain to stay hidden. The sun rose higher, casting long lines across the sand, making the group's movements easier to spot if they were careless. Evan guided them slowly, avoiding patrols and sensors. Each step was calculated, every pause deliberate. Hours later, they reached a narrow canyon that offered better cover. The walls were high, hiding them from scanners and sensors. Evan allowed the group to rest, giving Cato a small meal and water. Lyra stayed close, helping him eat and comforting him. The older aliens settled against the walls, tired but alert. Evan monitored the scanners continuously. The smugglers' ships were still present, but distant. The human fleet remained cautious, verifying the transmission. Evan knew the group had only a temporary reprieve. He would need to find a permanent solution, a place where the aliens could survive without fear of attack or hunger. As evening fell, the desert became cold. The wind carried dust across the canyon, and distant engines reminded Evan that danger was always near. He checked on Cato and Lyra, ensuring they were comfortable. The older aliens whispered quietly, discussing their situation in their own language. Evan listened, understanding the meaning, even if not the words. He prepared the final part of the transmission, a recorded message that could be sent if the situation worsened. It included images of the aliens, the tracking data of the smugglers, and a clear explanation of the events. Evan knew this would be the definitive evidence if Command questioned the live feed. As night fell, the group settled in the canyon. Cato slept, Lyra watched over him, and the older aliens remained alert. Evan stayed awake, monitoring the scanners and planning the next move. The smugglers were still out there, patient and dangerous. Human Command was still uncertain, though now informed. The moment of calm lasted only briefly. A faint signal appeared on the scanners, moving quickly. One of the small smuggler ships had returned, approaching from a different direction. Evan observed carefully, noting its pattern and speed. It was testing again, waiting for any sign of weakness. He whispered to Mara, "Do not fire unless necessary. We only act in defense." The ship passed near the canyon, sensors scanning, but unable to detect the hidden group. Evan allowed a quiet sigh of relief. They had avoided detection, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the smugglers adjusted their tactics. Evan returned to the aliens. "You are safe tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow we will move again. We will survive, but we must be careful. Trust me, and we will get through this." Lyra nodded, holding Cato close. The older aliens remained quiet, trusting Evan's judgment. He checked rations, water, and supplies once more. Every detail mattered. Every choice could mean life or death. The stars appeared over the canyon, distant and cold. The wind carried dust, and the faint hum of engines reminded Evan that the world beyond the rocks was not safe. The smugglers were patient, waiting for any mistake. Command was cautious, still uncertain. Inside the canyon, Cato slept. Lyra stayed alert, and Evan remained awake. The night was long, filled with tension and careful planning. Outside, the desert was silent, but danger lurked in every shadow. Evan knew the next day would be critical. The smugglers would return, and Command could still make mistakes. But for now, the aliens were fed, alive, and temporarily safe. That was enough to continue. Hope had survived, fragile but present, in the canyon. Evan knew he would need every ounce of skill, courage, and careful thinking to protect them in the days to come. The night stretched on, quiet but tense. The desert outside remained dangerous, but inside, life continued. Cato slept, Lyra watched, and Evan kept guard. The storm had not passed, but for the first time in days, there was a glimmer of peace. The desert was quiet before dawn, but Evan knew the calm would not last. The aliens were asleep, tucked into the canyon, small and fragile under thin blankets. Cato rested, breathing evenly for the first time in days, while Lyra stayed close, whispering softly to him. The older aliens leaned against the walls, listening to the distant hum of engines, their eyes alert even in sleep. Evan sat apart, scanning the horizon and monitoring the scanners. Every shadow, every signal mattered. The smugglers were still out there. Their ships had been moving through the desert for hours, testing, probing, waiting for a weakness. Human Command remained cautious, still verifying Evan's transmissions, unsure whether the aliens were truly innocent. One mistake, one misinterpreted signal, could trigger a strike and destroy the fragile peace. Evan knew he had to act quickly. He reviewed the last scans of the smuggler ships. They were fast, armed with human weapons and moving in irregular patterns designed to confuse any observers. Their plan was clever. They had created the perfect illusion to make it seem like the aliens were dangerous. But the tracking patterns, the speed, and the sensor signatures all told a different story. Evan had proof, enough to convince Command if he could get it to them in time. "Tonight, we move," he whispered to Mara, who was checking the scanners beside him. "We cannot stay here. The smugglers will adjust their tactics, and Command might act before they confirm the truth." Mara nodded. "The path we scouted is hidden but difficult. The aliens will need guidance."
They will follow, Evan said.
"They trust us. That is enough." He turned to the aliens.
We leave at first light. Stay close, move slowly, and follow my instructions exactly.
"Do not speak unless necessary. We must remain hidden." Lyra nodded, holding Kato's hand tightly. The older aliens gathered their few supplies, small bundles of food, blankets, and makeshift tools. They moved silently, each step deliberate. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon, Evan led the group out. The desert was cold, and the wind carried fine dust that stung exposed skin. The group moved carefully, following the path he had memorized. The rocky terrain provided cover, but it slowed their progress. Every sound, every movement in the distance was a potential threat. Hours passed. The group moved slowly but steadily. Tato struggled to walk, his small legs tiring quickly. Lyra supported him, whispering encouragement in her broken human language. The older aliens moved with surprising endurance, their determination clear at every step. Evan checked the horizon constantly, scanning for patrols or smuggler ships. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon that offered better cover and a natural barrier from sensors. Evan allowed the group to rest. Cato ate small portions of food, finally regaining some strength. Lyra stayed beside him, helping him drink water and keeping him calm. The older aliens watched the horizon, humming quietly among themselves. Evan allowed himself a moment of relief. For now, they were safe. Evan knew the smugglers would return. Their strategy depended on patience. They would wait for the group to move, then strike when the humans might misinterpret the aliens' presence. He could not allow that. He needed a final plan. He activated the scanners and located the smugglers' ships. They were coordinating from a position beyond the dunes, observing both the checkpoint and the canyon. Evan traced their movements carefully, marking their approach paths and timing. Then he prepared the broadcast. This transmission had to be perfect. It had to show the aliens, prove their innocence, and expose the smugglers' deception. He set up a live feed from the canyon, showing Cato eating, Lyra holding him, and the older aliens moving quietly, clearly weak and dependent. Overlaying the feed, Evan displayed the tracking data of the smugglers' ships, highlighting their speed, trajectory, and the impossibility of the aliens being responsible. He began the transmission. "This is the truth," Evan said, his voice calm but firm. "The aliens you have been told attacked the convoy are starving, weak, and incapable of violence. The true attackers are human smugglers. Their ships are fast, armed, and outside command control. Any action against the aliens will result in unnecessary deaths and escalate a conflict based on lies." Command received the transmission. Officers reviewed the evidence, paused, and finally sent orders to halt any strike plans. Verification teams were dispatched to observe the aliens directly. Evan allowed himself a quiet smile. The immediate danger had been avoided, but the smugglers were not finished. Their ships moved closer, testing the canyon perimeter. Evan instructed Mara and the soldiers to remain hidden but ready. Do not fire unless necessary. We act in defense, not as aggressors, he whispered. The smugglers' sensors passed over the canyon, scanning for heat signatures. Cato stirred, but Lyra shielded him. The older aliens stayed motionless, their small frames blending into the shadows. The ship passed, missing them completely. For now, the group was safe. Evan knew safety was temporary. He had to find a permanent solution, a place where the aliens could survive without fear of attack or hunger. Using the scanners, he identified a hidden valley beyond the next range of dunes. It was isolated with natural barriers against sensors and patrols. The terrain was difficult, but it offered a chance for true safety. He prepared the group for the move. Cato rested. Lyra helped him to his feet, and the older aliens gathered their supplies. Evan checked rations, water, and blankets. Every detail mattered. Any mistake could be fatal. The journey was slow and careful. The desert was harsh, and the sun was hot overhead. The wind carried dust that stung the eyes and made breathing difficult. The group moved silently, each step calculated to avoid patrols and sensors. Evan guided them, checking the horizon constantly. By evening, they reached the hidden valley. It was isolated, protected by jagged rocks and narrow passages. The aliens could move freely here without fear of detection. Evan allowed the group to rest. Cato ate, regaining strength, while Lyra stayed close, whispering encouragement. The older aliens settled in the shadows, calm but alert. Evan activated a final broadcast, a recorded message for command if needed. It showed the aliens in the valley, the tracking data of the smugglers, and a clear explanation of the events. This evidence could not be denied. Human command would have no choice but to recognize the truth. Hours passed. Night fell over the valley, cold and quiet. The wind carried dust across the rocks, and distant engines reminded Evan that danger still existed beyond the natural barriers. But for the first time, the group could rest without immediate fear of attack. Evan sat with the aliens, speaking softly. "You are safe," he said, "for now. But we must be prepared. The smugglers may return. Command may still react. We must survive, hide, and wait for the right moment." Lyra nodded, holding Cato close. The older aliens whispered quietly among themselves, trusting Evan's judgment. He checked supplies once more, making sure everything was ready. Every choice, every movement, could mean life or death. The night stretched on, filled with tension but also hope. Outside, the desert was dangerous, but inside the valley, life continued. Cato slept, Lyra watched, and Evan remained alert. By morning, the verification teams from Human Command arrived. They observed the aliens directly, confirming Evan's transmissions. Evidence of the smugglers' deception was undeniable. Command acknowledged the truth, ordering the human fleet to disengage from the area and monitor the smugglers instead. Evan allowed himself a deep breath. The immediate crisis was over. The aliens were safe, fed, and alive. Cato smiled weakly at him, finally unafraid. Lyra held his hand, relieved, and the older aliens hummed quietly, a sound of gratitude and trust. The smugglers' threat remained, but Human Command now understood the situation. Future attacks could be prevented, and the aliens could survive. Evan had protected them, guided them, and ensured that their lives were not taken because of fear or misunderstanding. The sun rose over the valley, pale but bright. The desert stretched endlessly, But the hidden valley offered safety, shelter, and hope. Evan looked at the aliens, small and fragile but alive, and felt the weight of responsibility ease slightly. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to relax. The storm had passed, for now, and life continued. Cato, Lyra, and the older aliens were safe, and the smuggler's deception had been exposed. Evan knew more challenges could come, but for now, humanity had shown its better side. He had chosen compassion over strict orders, trust over fear, and courage over hesitation, and it had saved lives. The desert wind carried dust across the valley, but inside, hope had survived. Cato laughed softly, Lyra smiled, and the older aliens hummed quietly. Evan watched them, knowing he had done the right thing. The aliens were safe, and humanity had a chance to be better. The story had reached its end, but the bonds formed in the valley would last. Trust, courage, and compassion had triumphed over deception and fear, and in the cold desert, under the rising sun, life continued. Evan stood, looking over the valley. The aliens were alive. The smugglers were exposed. Humanity had the choice to be better. And for now, that choice had been made.